The sixth book that I read in 2025 is How to Be an Epicurean: The Ancient Art of Living Well by Catherine Wilson. This is an introduction to Epicureanism, which I read about in The Swerve by Stephen Greenblatt, and I was very, very fascinated by the idea. This book is fine. It's an introduction. I think the idea of Epicureanism is probably more interesting than the book actually is. But I am fascinated by it. I like its overlap with existentialism. I like its overlap with John Stuart Mill. I like its overlap with Stoicism. But whereas Stoicism seems interesting but difficult to live by, Epicureanism, I think, is interesting and also a way of life that many people could accomplish. It gets dinged for believing that we should pursue pleasure, that should be the number one thing that humans strive toward is pleasure. But and so hedonism is often a word that gets associated with Epicureanism, but that's not what they mean at all. They just mean that similar to utilitarianism and John Stuart Mill, that we should be making decisions that please us, not necessarily at the offense of others. So I do recommend this idea. I'm going to read some more books about Epicureanism because I'm just scratching the surface of it, and I do think it's really interesting and a way of life. I've been interested in existentialism forever, and this book, or this idea rather, has a lot of overlap with that, but probably is a little bit more hopeful in terms of the end of life than existentialism is. And it's just really interesting that Epicurus, and this shows my lack of knowledge of all things antiquity, but it's really interesting that Epicurus was able to see that atoms make up all of life, and that nothing is created from nothing, and that when we die, our atoms are dispersed back into the universe. I mean, this was thousands of years ago, and yet he's coming up with these ideas. It's really, really interesting. I'd like to read a biography on him as well, which I think is in the future. So again, a very interesting idea to study, and I plan on doing that even more.